The legislature recesses. The governor says he's happy, others less so. Financing the government, some nervousness. Tension in the courts, not to mention death row. And an option exercised. What now for the nation, for the Senate, for Arkansas? Arkansas Week, next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. The General Assembly leaves town for recess. It'll be back. And the March Revenue Report comes in. That's where we'll begin tonight. Sarah Whites-Kodachek joins us from Arkansas Public Media. Hoyt Purvis, an independent journalist, columnist for the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Steve Brawner, an independent as well. Steve, the General, as noted, the General Assembly will be back after a few days, but it might be an appropriate moment to take a look and reassess the highlights. What happened and what didn't happen?
It was a really quiet session, to be honest, compared to some of the recent ones where the private option or Arkansas Works just dominated everything and nearly shut the thing down. It started off with tax cuts. It ended with guns temporarily legal almost everywhere, including Razorbacks games, but that was kind of curtailed a little bit. Made Martin Luther King Jr. gave his own holiday. Other than that, there just really wasn't a whole lot of big issues that really threatened to shut it down. They're coming back. They're in recess right now. They're going to come back in early May, tie up any loose ends, and then they're going to come back again for a special session about health care. Also, medical marijuana is supposed to be a big deal this session. Lots of bills passed, but nothing really huge that threatened anything. Most of the votes were largely large majorities. So it really, frankly, was a quiet session.
Well, I think there was but one stumble on the DHS appropriation, which of course includes the Medicaid money. They fell a couple of votes short in the House, I think, and then in short order went ahead and ran it through.
Well, everybody was going to want. I mean, people want to make their statement about that kind of thing, but we're all waiting on Congress and the Trump administration to find out what the waivers are going to be on Arkansas Works and if there's going to be any kind of health care reform this year or ever. So really that issue was taken off the table. Yes, there was a vote or two that was less than the 75% required, but it was never in jeopardy.
With so much hanging in Washington, what can a special session accomplish? What is Mr. Hutchinson going to ask it to do, and what can it do with the uncertainty in D.C.?
Well, if the Trump administration grants waivers on Arkansas Works, which is expected by everyone, then there would be the eligibility for the program would drop from 138% to 100% poverty line, and there'd be also a work requirement for recipients. And there's not much else. They'd come in and leave in about 3 weeks and 3 days and be done.
Now that would push, taking it from 138 to 100% of the federal poverty level, that would push how many off?
I have 50,000 in my head, but it's been a few weeks since I wrote the story. So it's a fair number, but they would go on to the exchange, and they would get a subsidy for purchasing their health insurance, assuming that that's still going to be the health care regime we lived under, at the end of the year.
Yeah. But how much of a subsidy? That seems to be very much in question as well, at least over the longer term.
Over the longer term, but right now Congress don't have a replacement. The one that they tried never even got through the House, and didn't even come up for a vote.
Right.
So, and they're going home now. And for a time, and now President Trump has got other issues to think about as of last night. So when we'll have major health care reform is certainly a question mark.
We've got the House divided, literally, at least the GOP conference, and the Senate very reluctant so far anyway to address really anything that either side might come up with.
Well, I think it reflects the polarization that we have and the fact that both representatives of both parties, members of Congress from both parties, are being sort of beholden to their more polarized groups within the party, meaning that it's going to be very difficult to get anything done. And as Steve indicated, the whole healthcare issue, which was a driving issue for much of the recent years, it just sort of fell flat. Nothing has happened on that. And although there's a lot of discussion about coming up with some kind of agreement, I don't see that. Even if something does come forward, there's questions about whether it can be approved in both houses. So,
yeah. Steve, it's worth mentioning highways also. We need $50 million. Probably we can find it, and to match that federal.
Supposedly that they have cobbled together that money, even though it depended on a surplus that at the moment doesn't appear to exist.
Yeah.
But supposedly they've got the money. We will not leave $200 million in federal highway funding on the table. But of course that goes back to the revenue reports, which have not been so great lately.
Well, any prospect for a near-term, larger fix in terms of highways?
I don't see how. There was an effort in the session by Representative Dan Douglas of Bentonville to pass a 6.5 cent wholesale tax on motor fuels. Basically, the voters would have had to approve a bond issue to make that go into effect. It didn't even get out of the House. There's no appetite in the legislature to pass anything major on highways. We've got a tax reform task force that's going to be meeting. Anything that would have to do with highways would have to be probably paired with a tax cut somewhere else. And I'm not sure what you would, right now. There is not a major consensus on what kind of spending would be cut, and eventually the federal funding is that faucet's going to be turned down a little bit. So I don't see where highways comes in the near term.
Well, one other thing that didn't get through, and that was a priority for Speaker Gillum, and that was the amendment.
Tried to pass an amendment that would have changed entirely the way that we go about amending the Constitution and changing initiated acts. It was very large, very long. The title alone was 4 pages.
Yeah.
And it did get to the House, but the Senate voted it down at the very end of the session. There were parts that people liked and parts that people didn't like, and people liked different parts. And it was just too much, too long, and it didn't get through. And so now we're just going to vote on 2 things: tort reform and voter ID.
All right, Sarah.
Yeah, I think that there was a significant failure on the part of the effort to get vouchers passed this session. So part of what stands out is those things that didn't go through: transgender bathroom bill.
yeah, as Steve indicated, certainly sort of from the general public perspective, I think mostly the session was about guns, and the other potentially controversial issues sort of, for the most part, faded away.
Bathrooms.
Yeah, good example.
Yeah. Well, with some help from the SEC. And
well, yeah. As so many people have commented by now, that the only thing that can go up against the NRA is the SEC, and in a sense, that's what we saw in this session.
The NRA, the gun lobby, if you will, got less than what it wanted at the end, but much, much more than what the legislation began as. Mr. Collins, Bill's gentleman from Springdale.
Right.
In terms of started out as campus carry.
It started out as faculty and staff would be allowed to carry, with a concealed carry permit, would carry guns. Representative Charlie Collins from Fayetteville.
Or Fayetteville, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And as it went along, it was just amended in the Senate to add some training requirements to it, but then that brought the NRA into it, and pretty soon it was, you can now carry a concealed weapon into the state capitol, and a lot of other places too, if you have a permit.
There was one piece of legislation related to Medicaid that shifts the responsibility to providers to help cut some of the $800 million that the state has agreed to cut out of Medicaid costs. So it is a significant shift in the system, and it may have a big impact, particularly on the medically frail population. Didn't hear much about it this session, but it did go through.
And with that, Steve mentioned the revenue numbers that have been a little anemic, certainly not as spirited, vigorous, as robust, I guess is the term, as we would hope. March revenues report came in, and Steve, it was not terribly encouraging.
No, we're down about $100 million this year from forecast. It's a combination of income taxes or corporate taxes and state sales tax. At this point, the governor is saying we can cover it based on what the budget is determined to be. Early on, there's an A category and a B category. That's, the way it's set up is that everything that's in A category is funded, and if we had the money, then we can spend it on the B category at the end of the year. And he says that no reason for alarm. We can still handle this, but it is getting a little bit. It's getting a little bit tight, and healthcare costs continue to go up. And looking forward in the future, it's hard to see how something doesn't have to happen in order to make these numbers add up.
Well, even with a full employment, near record unemployment in Arkansas, sales taxes in March were off $9 million, 4.5%, or below forecast anyway. Net available $50 million under forecast. And for year to date, sales tax $51 million under, almost 3% under now, in a $5 billion, $5.5 billion budget.
And we don't know
that money matters.
How much of that is because people are buying more stuff online, and we don't know. But there was an effort to try to collect more, to require out-of-state retailers to collect sales taxes on online purchases. We're all supposed to pay taxes when we buy stuff online. Very few of us do that. In fact, almost none of us do it because there's not really a mechanism. And there was an effort to try to require retailers to do that. It went nowhere. Another effort was made to try to require retailers to inform their consumers how much was bought, and that went nowhere. So that could have some effect with it, but I'm not sure how much.
I noticed the governor said that he's going to be keeping a watchful eye, and I'm sure he will be keeping a watchful eye, because if there are indication that we're into a significant trend here, that could have obviously significant implications.
April is scheduled to be execution month in Arkansas. Originally, Sarah, 8 executions over 4 nights within a 10-day time period, but it appears at this hour anyway that there is likely to be at most only 7.
Yeah, so
flurry of litigation in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, there are multiple ongoing lawsuits right now. Yesterday, a federal judge ruled in favor of an injunction for an inmate, Jason McGehee, who had been recommended for clemency just Wednesday. And the case was a challenge to the whole clemency process on multiple levels. It's been, some policies have been adjusted and overlooked by the parole board in order to get the clemency hearings done in time for the executions this month. And so attorneys for the inmates argued in multiple ways that that was an unfair, didn't meet due process standards. So the judge dismissed a lot of those claims, but he said that he was very convinced by this argument that there's a 30-day public comment period after clemency is recommended, and that can't be honored. In effect, the inmate would be put to death before that could be honored. And so he granted an injunction in the case of Mr. McGehee. There's another clemency hearing going on now.
Friday, this is
right.
Mid-Morning Friday as we're talking.
This is for Jack Jones. And the judge said that he would grant an injunction if clemency is recommended for Jones.
The timeline is such that one of the 3 drugs expires at the end of April. Now, add the 30-day comment period, and that would appear to be, or are we wrong, put Mr. McGehee out of reach of the execution chamber.
It seems highly unlikely that he could be executed in this round.
Guys?
I was just going to mention that this is a subject that has received a great deal of attention nationally, and even I was traveling some internationally. The fact that Arkansas was going to sort of have this concentration of executions, 8 within a short period of time, and certainly did receive considerable notice.
I spoke with the director of the Department of Corrections, Wendy Kelly, during the hearing, and she said that anytime an execution is scheduled, it puts just an unbelievable amount of pressure on the department, along with all of the lawsuits that they're navigating and trying to double check that the process is going to go as planned. And she said that for her, spacing them out 1 a month over 8 months would be even worse and potentially would lead to error. And we've heard a lot about former execution officials from other states coming forward talking about the emotional impact of being involved in executions back to back like that, especially as being a concern and a risk for error. So there's another case that was put to rest by the Supreme Court this week on an appeal to the Freedom of Information Act law, which was trying to get information from the ADC about the drugs, particularly like the package inserts, which were used last year to identify the drug manufacturers who don't want their drugs used for execution. So the Supreme Court issued an emergency stay after a circuit court judge, Wendell Griffin, said the department actually should release the package inserts and other information. This has been protected by a state secrecy law that the Supreme Court ruled on last year. So there's another lawsuit ahead next week that challenges the whole process, the speed and timing of the executions in federal court again.
Interesting, too, that in another federal judicial circuit there is litigation pending, which has been viewed favorably by an appellate by the Federal Appeals Court. I think it's cases out of Ohio in which the drug itself has been called into question again, or one of the drugs, midazolam.
Are you talking about the Ohio Supreme Court
Yes.
case that the justice referred to this week?
Yes.
Okay, so the Supreme Court ruling on that about the minimum due process?
This is the case in which I think the inmate plaintiffs are challenging the efficacy, the effectiveness of the drug itself. And am I wrong? And the court said, yeah, they may have a case here.
Okay.
And stayed.
The
Steve,
Federal Appeals Court on Thursday rejected Ohio's 3-stage drug cocktail
Yeah.
on the basis of midazolam, which, or however, I may be
The
mispronouncing
midazolam.
Midazolam. Print guy versus spoken word over there. But that's the same drug that Oklahoma has some problems with.
Arizona.
It's a sedative that puts them to sleep. It's the first stage, and there's a lot of questions about whether it actually puts the inmate to sleep enough that they feel no pain. And by law, it's how we're going to do it here in Arkansas. So there's still that question, but that's a different judge. It had to go up to the Supreme Court to affect our situation.
Story keeps moving. We'll continue to follow. By the time this broadcast reaches air, Hoyt, the nation will have again a full U.S. Supreme Court. An 8th associate justice will have been added, rounding out the court. But the price was high.
Well, the price was high in a sense that it reflects a dramatic change in the way the U.S. Senate operates and goes against tradition and history and dating back to Madison and the idea of the Senate as the cooling saucer when hot issues come up. This all, in a sense, was very inevitable from the time that Justice Scalia died more than a year ago. What is sometimes overlooked in all this is the fact that President Obama put forward a nominee, Judge Garland, who was never even given a hearing in the Senate. But basically what happened now is that on nominations, not just for lower court positions and cabinet positions, but for the U.S. Supreme Court, it now is a majority vote as opposed to facing a potential filibuster and a cloture vote requiring 60 votes. Now it's only 51 votes that's required. And the door was open for that by the former Democratic leader, Harry Reid, who was responsible for getting the reduction to apply to the everything but the Supreme Court. Now the question is still out there: what happens with legislative issues? For now, Senator McConnell, the Republican leader, insists that there's not going to be any change with regard to legislation, but the reality is there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure for that if the Democrats stick together enough to be able to block legislation, or it could be something where there's another kind of division. But as of now, 51 votes is enough for any court nominee, court appointment. We don't know what might happen with other legislative issues in the future.
A note for the record that both gentlemen who sit for Arkansas in the Senate, Mr. Bozeman, Mr. Cotton, join their colleagues in the Republican Congress. It was pretty much a straight party line vote with, I think, 3 exceptions on the Democratic
of course, there were several votes that, procedural votes, but you're right, both Senators Bozeman and Cotton were strong supporters of Mr. Gorsuch. And, once this whole process was set in motion, there was no doubt, I think, that Gorsuch would get at least the majority support, primarily from members of the Republican Party.
The 3 Democrats, maybe 4, I think 3, have one thing in common besides their party affiliation.
They face re-election in the next election cycle. And that, again, tells you what a politicized issue this has become.
Yeah.
And, it has some, you heard people like Lindsey Graham and John McCain lamenting the fact that, this was going against Senate traditions. Of course, they voted.
They went with it.
They went with it. So, it was a tradition that was not apparently that important to them.
Yeah. Draw Hoyt, if you would, on your days some years back as a Senate staffer. And there would be a lot of people would make the argument, okay, fine, do away with the filibuster. Ridiculous in this day and time.
Well, again, it represents a change in the distinctive nature of the Senate. And for many years, the Senate was a relatively bipartisan body, and with rights for the minority to be able to have some say in the way things operated in the Senate. But as I mentioned earlier, we've gone now to this situation where both parties in Congress are driven by their more polarized components, and that it does really. I mean, many people have commented on the changing nature of the Senate. It's different. It's a very different Senate than it was in the time of Joe William Fulbright and John McClellan and others, and dating back really through the history of the Senate. In a sense, it makes the Senate much more like the House.
Yeah. Steve?
I think we've taken really almost the final steps toward becoming a British parliamentary system, where the ruling party pushes through what it wants, and the minority party is basically backbenchers who have very little say over things. I was really struck in the House after the health care vote. Speaker Ryan spoke very much as a partisan person. There was like a majority leader, in fact, like a prime minister who had lost a vote in his own party, rather than as a Speaker of the House. Everything was about what we in the majority can accomplish. Not only do the senators represent the most, they're being governed by the most polarized parts of their parties, but that's because the parties are polarized. The senators themselves, the center is beginning to shrink so much that there's really not. This was almost inevitable because there's so little middle ground now that it's going to be, one party is going to get, the majority party is going to get their way on most cases. It's really hard to see how this government can possibly work in the future if the president and the Congress are controlled by 2 different parties. We'll have what we had during the last part of President Obama's term, which was total gridlock.
Well, you mentioned healthcare and the confusion in D.C., or we were talking about it earlier. Interesting that in those who have most adamantly, but the members of the Freedom Caucus most adamantly opposed what Mr. Ryan and Mr. Trump are trying to get through on healthcare, and of course that ended in a stalemate. Mr. Trump needs them worse than they need him.
Well, in the past, the next step would have been for people on both parties to come together and say, "I'm sorry, Freedom Caucus, we're not going to work with you. It'd be a bipartisan effort from the center, and the wings would have just been out to lunch." But that doesn't happen anymore. The fights are going to be within the majority party. If the majority party stays together, it's going to happen. If it doesn't stay together, I guess nothing happens.
Yeah, Hoyt, thoughts?
Well, of course, the whole question of the role of the Congress and the Senate in particular is going to come into play with the events related to the missile strike against Syria, and whether there's going to be an attempt to give some kind of congressional authorization. I'll just mention the fact that it was 100 years ago that we declared war in World War I. We've only had one declared war since that time. And again, the question comes up, what role does the Congress play in this important international issue?
Have to end it there because we're out of time. Thanks to everyone for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.